Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa tawassalatu Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Of course, today is Wednesday, and inshallah, we will go over some questions that we have. We have about 4 questions that we have received this week. As always, if you have a question, please send me an email, mufti@islamstl.org, and inshallah we will try our best to answer the questions on Wednesdays. So the first question is regarding the aspect of isal thawab, or donating reward to others. So the question is, I know that there are differences in reference to this issue, but I want to know what the majority opinion is about it. Can we recite Quran for other people, meaning for the purpose of donating the reward for other people, especially people who are not close relatives? So let me give the answer to this in parts. Right now, first of all, the short answer to this question is that recitation of Quran, whether it's Surah Yasin, whether it's some other portion of the Quran, whatever it may be, the answer is that it is not merely a cultural practice, but it does indeed provide benefit to those who are deceased, according to the majority of Sunni of isal thawab, what we call donating reward to others. So what is the legal ruling of donating reward to others? Now, with respect to this particular discussion, actions with a monetary component to it, such as what we can think of charity, sadaqah. Of course, that's something which is monetary. It's something that you pay money for. Or the Hajj pilgrimage. The Hajj pilgrimage is such that it has 2 components to it. One is the monetary aspect, where you are actually paying to go to the journey, and the second portion are the actual actions that you perform. So it's a means that has both mal as well as the actual actions to it. The second type that this action can be divided into are those actions which are solely physical actions, such as praying or fasting or recitation of Quran. Now, with regards to the first category that I mentioned, the scholarly consensus regarding this first type is that one may donate its reward to the deceased. And this is based on several clear. Muslim rahmatullah alayhi, he actually titles a section of his Sahih, and the title is, and I quote the title, "The reward of charity on behalf of the deceased reaches him." This is the actual title that Imam Muslim rahmatullah alayhi brings up in his Sahih. So he relates in that chapter that a man told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that his mother passed away a sudden death, and that she would want to donate charity, because probably it was a habit of hers that when she was alive, she would donate to charity. So he said that if she were to write in her will, then she probably would put that. So he then asked Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam if the reward of charity on behalf of his deceased mother would reach her. To which Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself replied, and he said, yes, that it would reach her. So that is a pretty clear-cut hadith and narration with regards to that issue. With regards to the second type of actions, which are physical actions with no monetary component, the view of some scholars was that one could not donate the reward to the deceased. Some scholars have mentioned that particular view. However, the majority of scholars, and especially the latter scholars, they affirm that one can indeed perform physical voluntary actions and donate the reward of those acts to those who are deceased. And this is established in views from all of the 4 major schools, by major imams that are in each school, the Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali madhahib. And all of them give the example of specifically reciting the Quran for the deceased. And this is notwithstanding minor differences, such as whether or not one who is reciting the Quran must be present at the grave of the one who has passed away or not. There are some people who give differences with that, but overall, a majority of them do say that recitation of the Quran does in fact benefit those who are the deceased. Now, the Ahnaf, the Hanafis specifically, they say that a person may designate the reward of any voluntary good action to another person. And this is irrespective whether who they intend to give the reward to is alive or not. So the person can even be alive and they can designate the reward for that person. This is what the Ahnaf say. And all of this without decreasing the reward from the one who is committing that action. For example, if a person recites Surah Yasin, and if they say, "Oh Allah, I intend to give the thawab of my reading to such and such person. One person may be alive and another person is passed away. So the Ahnaf say that yes, the scholars say that yes, you can designate the reward to both of those people. And at the same time, while the reward goes to those people, inshallah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Kareem, at the same time, the person who recites it, they also get the full reward of that. And because of this particular ruling, some scholars even go to the point and say that when a person does an action, for example, like giving voluntary charity or any voluntary work, that one should intend it on behalf of all of the believers, both men and women, as inshallah with this view, the reward will reach them and take nothing away from one's own personal rewards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Ghani, and He can bestow His reward upon whomever He wills. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does that, it does not take away from His treasure in any way whatsoever. So in fact, when we do good intentions and when we do good actions, the intention should be for this type of reward, so it can benefit more people, inshallah. This is according to the scholars. Now, what is the evidence of this, right? A couple of examples I'll give. Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi, he titled a section of his Sahih, which is entitled Performing Hajj and Fulfilling Vows on Behalf of the Deceased. So he relates in that section that a woman asked Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam if she could perform Hajj on behalf of her deceased mother who had made a vow to do so. To which he replied, yes, perform Hajj on her behalf. Right? So we know people perform Hajj on the behalf of the deceased. And if she had a debt, wouldn't you pay it back for her? This is what Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said. Pay off her debt to Allah. What is the debt towards Allah? It is the Hajj that she had missed in her lifetime, for He is more deserving of fulfilling obligations. And also in both Bukhari and Muslim, they relate in their collections that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if someone dies while owing obligatory fasts, then his relative can fast on his behalf. That is another thing that is mentioned over there. Now, it is also mentioned by ulama that when it comes to actions like salah and when it comes to siyam and whatnot, these are things in which fidya can be paid on behalf of the one who has passed away. And in fact, this is what one should do in those particular cases. This is why when a person passes away, a will that they leave behind, they should estimate salahs that they have missed, and update their will as they're trying to make up as much as they can. And for the rest of those that are missed, then, give the command to the heirs that give the fidya on behalf of the one who has passed away for those things. Now, what about with regards to reciting the Quran, which this question is about? So, the scholars mention an example, which was that this was a practice of Ibn Umar or Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma himself, the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab. We know one of the most famous companions of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So, there's an eminent imam that is in the school of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahmatullahi alayhi, whose name is Imam Abu Bakr al-Khallal, and he mentions in his work is commanding the good and forbidding the evil, Amr, which has to do with Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. He says that Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he once entered a graveyard with some of his students. This is a very famous example that's given. So he once entered and he saw a blind man. He saw a blind man who was sitting at a grave and reciting the Quran. So Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he told this man to stop doing this act since he considered it a bid'ah. Now, when they left the graveyard, one of his students narrated a hadith to him, which had a sound chain of narrators that Ibn Umar himself left a bequest. He left in his will that someone should recite Quran at his grave after his demise. So upon hearing this narration, and upon hearing that this was the practice of a great companion of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab, who we know how strict they were when it came to implementing the sunnah, Imam Ahmad then told the student to return and go back and tell the blind man to go ahead and continue his practice of reciting the Quran at the grave to benefit the person who had passed away. So this was a very famous example that was given with regards to this particular issue of reciting the Quran. So to summarize, you can, as in all matters of ikhtilaf and differences of opinion, we know that that is a blessing that we have in Sharia. Such issues, it should be such that they should not be a source of dispute or animosity among Muslims. Rather, we leave these things to the ulama and to the scholars who have the ability to interpret these types of things. These issues at the end of the day, they're not a central tenet of faith. These are things that we should, again, not dispute with and whatnot. The unity of the Muslims, as we know, is an obligation of utmost priority. So, subhanAllah, we should appreciate rather that there is sufficient precedent from amongst the sunnah and amongst the rulings of the scholars for this act of isal thawab, to donate the reward of voluntary works to others, as we have said. So people who practice upon these actions, they should not be condemned nor blamed, because they are following legal rulings of ulama and scholars themselves. And if people prefer themselves not to engage in those actions, then that's okay as well. They don't have to, but they should not condemn people who are fulfilling these types of actions, as we have talked about right now. So that's one thing. The second question is, we'll be quicker in these last few questions because it will be Maghrib time soon. But second question I wanted to ask regarding personal items of someone who has passed away, specifically the person's clothes, shoes, and medical supplies which were remaining. They said that one person in my family suggested that if all of us heirs agree, these items should be donated to the poor and to the needy. So if we all agree to the distribution, will this donate these items of the one who has passed away to charity? So the answer to this question is, in principle, if all of the heirs are the age of adulthood and they agree to donate the items of this person who had passed away, then it will be permissible to do so. Now, if any of the heirs are minors, if they are children, if they are too young to make that type of decision, then it will not be permissible to donate these items in charity without their approval, in the sense that they want to donate. And they may grant the minor the value of those items, the clothing and the other items, to charity. So they have to, estimate what the value of those items would be, and then whatever the share of the heir would be from that, they would give that to the minor, because the minor at the time is too young to make that decision. Otherwise, they can hold it back, and when the minor gets older and old enough to make the decision, then if the minor also agrees at the time when they are old enough to make that decision properly, then they can donate it after that. Next question, which has become very common, and as we know the situation we're facing right now with COVID, we've been asked this question plenty of times, that what is the ruling on how we have distancing in the Sufu? We have opened the masajid in limited capacity, and we know that we have spaced out. We know that the ahadith of taswiyatul sufuf and straightening the rows is something which is emphasized throughout the hadith. So what about now when we are praying with these distant sufuf and we are praying a few feet apart from each other? Is the ruling with that? Can we do that? And is the salah still accepted in that manner? So in principle, with the taswiyah of sufuf, of the straightening of the rows and joining of the rows and not leaving gaps in between, no doubt it is an emphasized ruling in Islam, but it is an emphasized sunnah when it comes to the ruling of that. That is the hukum of that. It is definitely disliked to leave a gap or space between the rows. However, in the context of COVID-19 and in the situation we face right now, if one practices upon this rule of social distancing in the masjid, we are excused for that, because this is something at the end of the day does not affect the validity of salah. Rather, it is something which is an emphasized sunnah. But in the case, of course, when we are facing this health crisis, because of the fact of the benefit of one's health. So at the end of the day, yes, inshallah, the ruling, the salah itself will inshallah count. And we hope and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this goes away, so that we are able to join shoulder to shoulder and stand close to one another again, inshallah. Second part of this question is standing in the first row more virtuous than standing in other rows? And if one does stand in the first row, is the right side of the row better or the left side virtuous? So there are, of course, many ahadith that talk about the virtues of standing in the first row during the salah. For example, in Ibn Majah, it was narrated that Abdurrahman ibn Auf said that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the angels, they send blessings upon the first row, yani those who are in the first row. Another narration narrated by Al-Ibad ibn Sariya radiallahu ta'ala, that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that he used to, it says, yusalli ala saffil awwali thalathan. Now, yusalli here doesn't mean that he prays, but rather he sends blessings upon those who are in the first row 3 times and upon those in the second row 1 time. So we can see the emphasis upon that. And we know other hadith that talk about the blessing of the first row. People would even draw lots to sit there and whatnot. So many of the hadith that talk about that. So that's that portion of that. Now the second portion was just talking about standing on the right side of the row. Yes, standing on the right side of the row, the scholars mention as well, and it's mentioned in the narrations that it is more virtuous than standing on the left side of the row. However, the scholars also say that, look, if the right hand, then what do? You also even out the row by standing on the left side. And those who have the intention to stand on that side, inshallah, they will also be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One should create balance in the rows as well. It doesn't mean that they should only fill this right side and have the imam standing alone on the left side there. No, but rather you even out the rows. And inshallah, those who have the intention to stand there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give the reward for that. So These are some rulings when it comes to that. Sometimes when you come to the masjid, you see a lot of people lining up on the right side and the left side is, almost empty. We should also make sure to even out the rows. That is something which is an important ruling in this aspect. So inshallah, we will end over there. Once again, if you have, please send your questions to mufti@islamstl.org. Inshallah, we will try our best to answer those questions on Wednesdays. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.